If you're not seated in the next few seconds, you have to teach chapter 7, the Song of Solomon. Everybody just falls down where they are. All right, so good to see everyone this morning. It's great to hear everyone talking and greeting, and then there's a lot of visitors here. We appreciate you being here. It's really good to be together, of course, on any day to be able to worship God, and this Lord's Day is no different. So we are continuing in our series this quarter on raising godly, or having godly families, and then this particular section we're doing building godly marriages, and we went through a few lessons at the beginning of that, and now we're in Song of Solomon for the first time ever, and we're in chapter 3, and we'll be covering through chapter 5 today. There's only 8 chapters in the book, and so we'll be going through chapter 5 like you can see, and then we'll have basically a couple more classes where we cover the last few chapters. And we'll be switching gears a little bit in those, so not worrying too much about that. But tell me what we've learned so far in Song of Solomon. Some of the things that have stuck with you. Jeff's not here, so I'll mention gazelles. Lots of gazelles. What else?
It's a love song.
It's a love song, right? It's a song. And so it is a love song. It's highly poetic. The language can't be taken literally in much case. It's obviously, I'm not even sure it's an actual couple. I think it's probably, the idea is it's like you write a song about 2 people that never really existed, and so you're just telling the story of them. It is, through Solomon, by God, and so you have this inspiration of the book itself. You have, tell me about the metaphors. When we read, because we're going to have some metaphors today, there's lots of metaphors. What are the metaphors like, and how do we interpret them? Rich, go ahead.
Well, for us, our metaphors are usually visual, but for theirs, it is the value of something.
Yeah, absolutely. When we use a metaphor, when we say something is like something else, we mean that it reminds us by looking at it. When you use the Hebrew metaphors here, it really focuses more on the quality. And so if you looked at someone you loved and say your eyes are like a doe's eyes, you mean that they're big and like a Disney doe eye or whatever like that. If what they would look at, they would say your eyes are like a pair of fawns that are quality, and they live long, and they are prepared for the field. And you go, what? Well, it's quality. They're saying your eyes are high quality and considered high quality. And back then, that was super romantic talk. And so they'd put it on Valentine's cards and all that, different from what we would do. Yeah, maybe not Valentine's cards. But the point is that it's different as we read it, and we'll be staying to that as we go. That also keeps you a little bit out of trouble trying to understand some of this. Okay, so this morning what we're going to do is we're going to pick off where we left off, which is this couple is now what we would call engaged, betrothed, or whatever you want to call it. They're moving towards marriage, and today is going to be going into the marriage scene. And so they're going to get married. They finished kind of the dating phase. They've moved to this phase, and we're going to be jumping in with the scripture on that. And that's what starts in chapter 3. So if I can get a prayer leader first, one of the men. Grant, you keep making eye contact. We know it's going to happen. You might as well just raise your hand, act like you wanted to. And then Jordan, if you would read for us as well. So Grant, if you lead us in that prayer, and then we'll read the first section.
Father, we thank you for the day. Thank you for the privilege we have to come and worship you. We ask you to please be with all the teachers and help guide the classes. Thank you for their efforts they put in. Thank you for your word that you've given us. We draw closer to you. We ask you to please watch over us in this time. Let us focus our minds solely on you and remove distractions from our minds. In Christ we pray.
Amen. All right. And Jordan will read for us. Thank you.
On my bed by night, I saw him whom my soul loves. I saw him, but found him not. I will rise now and go about the city in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The watchmen found me as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely I had passed him when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house, into the chamber of her who conceived me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases.
Okay, so we have a scene here. Obviously, like we said, they're engaged. betrothed, whatever you want to call it, but we identify with the concept of engaged. This is a couple that's moved their relationship to the next level. They are at a point where they're now thinking of the future. She is especially, and we're going to see that reflected here. And she's already, like, I'm ready to have a life with this man. I'm ready to start a family with this man. I'm ready to move forward with this man. All of these things are held up in here. And so she's there, and then there's this scene where she's on the bed by night. And this bed is different from the first chapter. In the first chapter, when he brought her into the chambers, that was just like an inner room, and it wasn't anything to do with intimacy or anything like that. This is the love bed. This is a different type of bed, and this is in a house that it sounds like, and I mean, there's a lot of different interpretations, but I think if we look at this way, feel free to say a different interpretation. Think of it as a house, as they're preparing to get married, that it sounds like she may have inherited from her mother. And so you basically she's living in her mother's old house, which explains the idea that eventually they're gonna live together and they will have the master bedroom in a sense. And so you look at it that way. But in the setting here, she's there and she's thinking of him and she's like, I'm just sick with love. And I want my man, I want him to be with me. And so she says, what does she do? What does she go out and do? Yeah, she goes out and searches for him, doesn't she? She just goes out into the city and starts searching for him. And like we said, this is something that's, there's an intimate intonation to this, but consider she's alone. There's nothing wrong going on here or anything like that. So she goes out into the city and seeks for him. And what happens?
She has trouble finding him.
Yeah, there's a little bit of trouble. She goes out, and there's some repetition here. What is the repetition? Did anybody pick up on it?
Whom my soul loves.
Whom my soul loves, over and over again. I sought him whom my soul loves, sought him and found him not. And she says, I will seek him who my soul loves. And then she came to the watchmen, and when they found her, because she's wandering through the city as a female alone, they were like, whoa, what's going on? She says, have you seen him whom my soul loves? And then finally, when she says, I barely had scarcely passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. So do you see what do you think is what do you think is the message here?
She's feeling kind of desperate.
Yeah, there's a desperation for sure and feeling in this, Jennifer.
I read this as a dream.
Okay.
I didn't take it literally because I think if you took it literally, you have to answer a few questions like how do they know who she's talking about?
Yeah.
And, why would she take him into her mother's house? That would have been highly,
Yeah.
probably pretty improper. So I kind of thought she was dreaming about what she just wants to have him now.
Okay, yeah, and I think that's reasonable, and I think that you bring up a good point too. On the bring him to her mother's house, she says, I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house. I think what the idea is that she just, it's like, and it may be in a dream as well, but there's just simply like this, I'm not letting you go until we're married. I cannot let you go again. I can't be separate from you, which is just a beautiful picture. I mean, it's the way we should be with those that we're going to marry, and just think, I can't, wait to start a life with you. And I think that that's the feeling here in that. And so when we look at that and you say, I would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house, the chamber of her who conceived me. And then, like I said, if you look at that as an inherited house, I think that's a very plausible explanation of this. And so there's that part of it. And ultimately you see that that's the case and that they're there. So then what happens in verse 5? Yeah, it's the second warning like this, isn't there? And there's 3 total. There's actually one after they're married that she says to the daughters of Jerusalem to let them know that there's a time for everything. And so in chapter 3 here, she says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up love or awaken love until it pleases. So here's the thing I wanted to ask you about. Is there a risk at this stage in a relationship of romantic love turning into something it shouldn't before a couple is married? Yeah. I mean, it's almost rhetorical, right? Yeah, we know that there is a risk in that. Intimacy changes at this stage, doesn't it? It changes, and you've made a decision, a commitment, if you will, but the problem is it a commitment? Not yet, it's not, and that's the problem that we would, obviously tell young folks to say, be careful in this stage in doing that. there's a saying from a long time ago. Basically it's placing a limit on this idea to this is what I would call the try it out stage. You're kind of thinking like you're married, but you're not. And but you made a commitment to do so, but you're not. I don't know if I heard this from Jen a long time ago and someone else had said it and it came through her, but it's the idea of long to date but quick to marry. And I think that that's a really good rule of thumb for young couples is take your time finding your person. But once you make that decision to marry, and I've seen this a lot, and I'm not picking on anyone, I'm not even thinking of anyone right now. So if you had this, then that's not the point. But I've seen this a lot where people go, oh, we're getting married. I actually have a friend right now. He's a worldly friend. He's not a Christian or anything, but he's like, oh, yeah, I'm engaged. He told me that in 2022. They're getting married the end of this year. And I'm going, you've been engaged for, that's a long time to be engaged. And of course, it's a worldly couple, so none of this matters to them. But the point is that if you're setting the stage for a relationship, and you're going to say we're going to get married, and you've moved to this level, and she says, I just can't stop thinking about him. But you're saying, but I'm going to live in this stage now for another 2 years because we just want that perfect date. Or we just aren't ready to commit to this until this time, or this venue wasn't open for 2 years. Do you think that that's a good idea in general? And here's the truth. I'm going to argue this. Is there anyone who's going to argue with me that, no, I think that's great. And I think it's a really good idea. And I've never known anybody have anything go wrong with that. Everyone here has been young at one point, and some of you still are. But here's the point. This is a dangerous territory, folks. It just simply is. It's a dangerous territory, and the risk rises at this stage of the game. And I think that that's what the warning is from her, is she's saying, be careful, this is a dangerous area. Any comments on this? Anyone want to argue that that's, no, there's no danger there? Yeah, I didn't think so. All right, wise people. All right, verse 6 and another reader for me, 6 through 11 for these. All right, Rich, and then I'll get you next, Leah.
What is that coming up from the wilderness, like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense with all the fragrant powders of a merchant? Behold, it is the litter of Solomon. Around it are 60 mighty men, some of the mighty men of Israel. All of them wearing swords and expert in war, each with his sword at his thigh, against terror by night. King Solomon made himself a carriage from the wood of Lebanon. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, its seat of purple. Its interior was inlaid with love by the daughters of Jerusalem. Go out, O daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon with the crown with which his mother crowned him, on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart.
Okay, so we see obviously there's a switch of scene here. And what does this sound like to you? Ron?
Kind of making his way to the wedding,
Yeah.
Even with a king, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a wedding processional, isn't it? I mean, he's heading out to meet her to be married, and this is the big day. And so he's coming, and she says, what is this coming up out of the wilderness? We're going to see that theme of the wilderness, by the way. And I would guess that you guys would agree with this as well. Wilderness is basically described as anything before marriage. It's like you're just in a wilderness. And so it's kind of a rough place to navigate. It's less certain. But here it's the same way. He's coming out of the wilderness, columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, and all of this litter and this carriage is coming. So what is the picture you get here? What is it that, how do they describe this thing? What stands out to you? Let me ask that. What stands out to you, how he describes this?
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal, right? And who is it? It's King Solomon, right? And we talked about this too. I don't think that this is literally King Solomon. I don't think that he actually married one of the shepherds and did this, shepherd ladies basically, and did this to marry her. That he's a shepherd too. And so do you think that this wedding litter actually looked like this? It's not likely. No, they're basically poor. There's not a lot to be brought out. But to her, watching her man come in his procession, whatever it looked like, coming to marry her, what did it look like?
King Solomon and all his mighty men.
Yeah, and no one could surpass the glory because it's King Solomon. Now, who wrote this? Solomon, yeah. And so he had to think of some quality metaphor, right, for describing how this would look. And he goes, well, me? I mean, of course it would be Narcissus much, right? And it gets worse as the book goes on, actually. We're going to point out some other stuff where he wrote and basically was like, I am the basic standard of awesomeness. And so, you need to consider me when you look at the quality. Rich?
So when I look at this, and like you said, the wilderness is anything before marriage. You can look at that also in our lives as anything before Christ. So
That's true.
What it's describing really is our relationship with Christ, that marriage there.
Yes, always keeping in mind that although I do not believe that this book is a full allegory of Christ and the church, I mean, there's some people who do take that view, and I think you can flatten it to some extent and make that point, and that's fine. But I do, obviously, we know that marriage is an allegory of Christ and the church, is Christ and church is his bride. And so we take this concept of anything before that is wilderness, and I think that's very, very apt, very apt. Okay, so what are your guys' thoughts then? We'll go ahead and tread into dangerous territory here. What is your thought then is, what do you think about the presentation of a wedding in comparison to starting the marriages? In other words, what do you think about this wedding? Do you think this is the type of wedding people need? Is it necessary to make a big deal out of it, or do you think it's not, or what? Give me your thoughts. Everybody's like, I thought you meant something else by dangerous, but yeah, so.
I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying, that this didn't actually happen, so it wasn't this huge to-do, but
Right.
the feeling was there of it being a huge thing.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Danielle said it's not that this actually happened in one sense. It was this big to-do, but it's all in the imagination or the way that they perceive it. Here would be my point about it, and you're probably thinking the same thing. No matter what your wedding looked like, hopefully it looked like this to you. Hopefully it was like this to you. Hopefully it was amazing, no matter whether it was a pauper's wedding or a rich person's wedding, or it had litters of carriages, people wearing swords, or whether it was 2 people and a preacher. Hopefully it was this, because the seriousness of what's happening here overshadows the pomp and circumstance of what it is. And it's not about the size of the wedding or how much money or whether the men of mighty valor are there. It's about the 2 people coming together and how they view the entrance into this, what God is going to join in one person. And that's the magic of what's going on here in doing that. Okay, other comments on this part? All right, you guys are holding up all your comments for later. I like it. All right, what does she invite the daughters of Zion to do? Yeah, she wants to share how great her man is. It's like, go out and look at him. Look at King Solomon, the crown. His mother crowned him with the day of his wedding, the day of the gladness of his heart. Look how happy he is. She's wanting to share this day, and that's a beautiful thing as well in that. Just thought I'd mention that before we moved on. All right, Leah, if you don't mind, chapter 4.
Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from washing, all of which bear twins, and not one of them has lost its young. Your lips are like the scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in rows of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of gazelle, that graze among the lilies. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, I will go away to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you.
Okay, so as we go in, this will teach everyone, don't volunteer to read unless you've seen the screen. I do notice that there's a pause every time they go, yeah, I'll read this. No, this is all PG. We're adults here. So as we start off this, obviously, this is marriage and end scene. This is moving into their time together and such like that. And he's describing her. And there's this description as we go again, the metaphors of quality that are there. But I wanted to point out one other thing. What is this book ended by? It's kind of a chiastic structure, but it doesn't fully fit that structure. What is his description of her book ended by?
She's beautiful and there's no flaw.
Yeah, there's no flaw in you. She's flawless. And if you look through this list, that's basically the way you want to see this, is her eyes, her hair, her teeth, everything about her is just simply flawless. And so that's his impression of her as she's there as the bride, and as now they are married and doing that. And so this is the beginning, and obviously you can see language in here about the myrrh and the frankincense and all the things together, and get this picture of intimacy. There is, it's there, and we certainly see that starting at this point. So you know that they don't have kids. And so there's nobody there to mess this up. So there is this change that's happening here in this relationship and doing that. So as you look at this love, as you look at this description of love, I wanted to ask a couple questions. One is that this is the beginning of love. I'll say it that way. This is the beginning of love. But can the honeymoon phase last throughout the marriage? Let me explain your answer too. So back it up. All the husbands and wives are like, hard, please don't do this to me. Yeah. Can the honeymoon phase last throughout the marriage?
Maybe in one sense, but not actually.
Okay. I think that there's fairness in that. I'm gonna ask you to explain that, but go ahead.
Now, there's going to be times in anybody's marriage that things are going to come up either internally or externally that are going to affect that relationship, and it's not going to be simply all is calm and everything's fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
nevertheless, there is still that bind that God has put in between those two that's going to last.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting it. Okay. Rodney, you moved, I saw you.
Yeah, yes, in that when we understand.
Patricia's not in here. You can say what you really think.
Well, earlier I was going to say, when you said this wasn't really happening with all the fancy stuff, I was going to explain how when I proposed to Tricia, we were going down the road and I had my ring and I said, I guess you want this. And look at how it turned out. All these years later, we're still together. So what she was picturing,
That's right.
Solomon on his chair.
It's probably true.
But, no, I think yes, because it should be, when we understand love, there is an infatuation that is there in the initial part, but real love keeps that going in the sense that you're still attracted to one another. You're still, you enjoy being together. You want to be together. You want to do things together. That should continue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you guys are saying, because I think both of you have hit upon this. Rich, did you?
I disagree with Tom.
Yeah, no, I think those are hand in hand. Go
I
ahead,
was
Rich.
going to agree with them that, not only is it still there, it should get stronger as time goes. And I can actually beat Rodney. We must be the least romantic people in life, because I didn't have a ring and it was over a car.
Yeah.
Just saying, I guess, well, I want to marry you, all right?
Yeah.
So still going after, 27 years, so we're doing good.
Yeah, and so there you go. Yeah, so it's more about the commitment than it is those things. And I think that there is a truth. John, did you?
Well, there's obviously, to keep this going, there's some maintenance involved. You've got to be able, you can make yourself easier to love, and you can make yourself hard to love. It's up to your maintenance on yourself and your view of your mate.
Yeah, boy, is that not true. That is very wisely spoken, John, that you can make yourself easy or difficult to love. But the truth is that after marriage starts and there's that honeymoon, that passion love, that there is a way that love changes shape. in a marriage. It just simply does. It hopefully doesn't go away. It does in some marriages, and you see the results of that. Hopefully it changes shape into something good and what God intended in that. But it does change shape, and it molds to the purpose at hand. Marriage is God intended. It's God designed. It is God purposed. There's a reason for marriage and for us to learn the lessons that's there. And at the beginning, it is fiery. It's passionate. But that love changes shape. It's not that it loses the concept of that. It changes shape to the mold to its purpose in that. I want to consider that. I want to read something. You guys know I love C.S. Lewis, so we're going to read C.S. Lewis. And there's a book by C.S. Lewis called Four Loves that's really, really good. This doesn't come from there, oddly enough, but he goes into the four biblical loves, and it's a really good book. You have to take some time. But he really dives into the four different types of love, and I think he does a phenomenal job. This actually comes from Mere Christianity, which probably most of you have read. But I wanted to read this to you and kind of consider what it is that he's saying here, because I think he puts it in a great way. He says, love in the second sense, love as distinct from being in love, is not merely a feeling. It is a deep unity maintained by the will and deliberately strengthened by habit. Reinforced by, in Christian marriage, the grace which both partners ask and receive from God. They can have this love for each other even at those moments when they do not like each other, as you love yourself and even when you do not like yourself. They can retain this love even when each would easily, if they allowed themselves, be in love with someone else. Being in love first moved them to promise fidelity. This quieter love enables them to keep the promise. It is on this love that the engine of marriage is run, being in love with the explosion that started it. And I think that's a really beautiful picture, and it's mostly what everyone was saying here, and that is this idea that this love does start like an explosion, and there's all this other parts to it that we're going to, we see this in this book. But the love that keeps the engine going, the love that sustains and keeps that promise there, moves beyond this. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how designing your marriage to move beyond this first stage of love actually is protective. As he said, you have this promise of fidelity that happens in passionate love, but the keeping of that promise happens in the quieter love that comes later. And I love that description in this. Any comments about this? Any other input to that part? All right. So you can take a look at this and see if you want to volunteer to read. This one's innocent, it's easy, so quick, put your hand up. All right, Rodney, if you don't mind.
Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Depart from the peak of Amana, from the peak of Sinir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of Lebanon.
Okay. What is he saying? You know, they're married and there's this commitment happening and they're moving out to be together. You know, the man shall leave his father and mother and be joined together, and the two shall become one. So what is it that he's saying here? What is his invitation? Remember, it's poetic. Where was she at? No?
Yeah, this is like a lofty look.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a little bit, I can see where you could read it a little backwards. He's sending out the invitation from Lebanon to come to Lebanon. I know that reads odd. I should have mentioned that, sorry. Depart from where? Those fancy mountains? Yeah, those mountains, the crags, the cliffs, the rocks. It's the peak of Amana, the peak of Sinir and Hermon, but the dens of lions and the mountains of leopards. What do you think that is that he's inviting her from and to?
Well, when I read that, Den of Lions is not a very safe place. And given that she was saying that her family treated her poorly, he's saying, come away from that and come to me. I'm going to take care of it.
What is an invitation of a husband supposed to look like scripturally to come and join into a marriage? What should it look like? What does this tell us it should be? What is the feeling that a wife should have as she joins into that marriage? Safety. What else? Security, absolutely. Peace. You know, she came from a place where her family mistreated her. She said, they didn't like me. They put me out in the fields. They mistreated me. I never had time to even take care of myself as a woman to try to find someone. And now he's saying, come from those mountains. Come from the leopards and the lions. Come from the danger and come into a place where now you're protected. Now you have a place of peace. And it's a different place than where she lived before, and it's important to note that and to be able to understand that. So one of the survey questions that we had was, what would you change about your spouse in order to make your marriage more healthy, effectively? And one of the top answers was, if my spouse was less anxious, brought less anxiety into the family. And I thought that was an interesting one. We live in a society where the number one prescribed drug in our society is what? Anti-anxieties, yeah, and that type of thing. So we obviously deal in a society that somehow breeds anxiety and stress and all those different things that come together. And so as we look at this and his invitation to do that, the goal here is to bring her out of a place that's full of anxiety and stress and mistreatment, to bring her into something that's peaceful. And husbands, that's a good thing for us to realize and see. Even if you didn't do that to begin, maybe it's something we need to take an inventory of and look and see, are we providing a place that's safe, peaceful, loving, protected? And do we continue to do that? You know, we haven't talked a lot. You knew it was coming, but 1 Peter 3:7. And Ken, can you read this for us? Just 1 Peter 3:7, that last one.
Likewise, husbands, rule with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question of the men first, especially husbands, but any man can answer this. What does it mean to you to dwell with your wives in an understanding way? How would you put that? Since it's a command for us that will keep us from being heard by God, you've probably given it some thought. So what is it, Bible scholars? What does it mean to dwell with your wives in an understanding way?
Listen twice as much as you speak.
I think that's a given in any husband-wife relationship, probably, but listen twice as much as you speak. I think that's a biblical principle. Okay, what else? What is it? Go ahead.
Because we're not always going to understand, since we are different, we're not always going to understand their position on things, but you try to be understanding, and you try to, even if you don't, you just peacefully,
Yeah.
Okay, I don't get that, but we have a mind to desire peace and to work with, the difference in thinking.
So it takes work.
Yes.
It takes work. It does, Rodney.
I was going to say, you need to know your wife. I mean, I know I could make my wife cry and hurt her in every argument or any disagreement we ever have. I could do that. I know what would do that. And you understand the nature of the difference between you. You know her, and you work towards a good, beneficial result.
You don't take advantage of that knowledge. You take it into account.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Okay. Yeah.
Is it in song a song where it says, happy wife, happy life?
I think that is the very last verse, but 15 in chapter 8, yeah. It's been removed for editing, but yeah, happy wife, happy life. I think that there's a place to that, okay. The Bible doesn't say, and there's a lot of jokes about this, the Bible does not say to men, you need to understand women. But he does say to husbands, you need to understand one woman. And that is a requirement. It is a commandment. And there is that's what the commitment is there for. That's what it's all about, is understanding that woman and understanding what it is that she needs and what she doesn't need, what to protect her from and what that she needs to be able to do. All of that is well within that understanding. And what is the result if we do not? Yeah, it sounds like sin to me. It sounds like sin. That your prayers will be hindered. God's not going to be hearing you if you're treating your wives this way. We got a glimpse of that out of Malachi, didn't we? You treated your wives horribly, and I'm not listening to you anymore. He said it there. Same exact thing. Question for the wives now. Wives, what do you think it is for a husband to show honor to his wife as the weaker vessel?
I think it's understanding that women are much more an emotional creature, and that when we commit to a man, we're saying, I am being vulnerable and I'm giving you the ability to hurt me in a way that nobody else can. And so a husband
Very good. Yeah, I like that. Okay, other women? What does it mean to you for your husband to understand you as the weaker vessel, to protect you as the weaker vessel?
Looks like we're gonna have to tell them.
Rodney's lesson today will cover that. Let me share you something that I kind of learned along the way. I think that this is just my experience in this, and I have a couple different points to make. But this part, 1 Peter 3:7 has hit me hard in my marriage. There was a point in my marriage where I was sitting with Jen and I was dumping the things that were going wrong in our company and the stressors that were hitting, and they were big. They were things that kept me up at night. I walked the floors and I was like, I don't know if we're going to have a place to live at the end of this week. That's happened in our marriage times before, and all of you have had stressors like that before in your lives. And as men, we're walking the floors at night trying to figure out what our future looks like. And I came to her and I was just like that, and I dumped it. And Jen said something to me that taught me a lesson that I have never forgotten. She said, I need you to stop. And she said, you need to remember I'm the weaker vessel. And I remember that to this day. It impacted me. I thought, what am I doing? This isn't my job. This isn't what I promised when I said to my bride, come out of the mountains and the leopards and the lions. And then I throw her into a den and I go, here, look at this. That's not what my purpose was. That wasn't my job. And she reminded me very, very sweetly in that. And I remember that to this day. That is not our jobs, husbands, to dump everything and the anxiety of the world on your wife. You are better equipped to handle that. You are. This verse says that as much. It is not talking about physical strength. It's talking about the ability to deal with the things that you need to protect your wife from. That's just simply the scriptures. That's the truth of it. So that's what I would say about that. The flip side of that is husbands go, well, what am I supposed to do with all this stress and all the other things going on? And that, well, there's hunting and things like that. But you could say like that, but here's what I'll say, and you guys, some of you guys have heard this that I've used before. I don't think I got it anywhere. I think it was just more my own thinking and curiosity through this, trying to examine the role of a husband. But one of the things I've said often to husbands, and like I said, some of you have heard it, and that is that husbands were built by God to handle that stress. We are designed, as much as the wife is designed to be understood and to be protected as that weaker vessel, husbands are designed to meet that need and to hold that stress and to hold that job. And what I've always said about that is that a man's shoulders are only so wide, right? And it seems like a lot of times we live our lives, especially in this nation, I think it's the truth, where we feel like our shoulders are full. We've got our job and our family and the world on it and the things from the church maybe and other jobs going on. There's a lot of stresses and pressures that a man holds on his shoulders. And what it feels like a lot is that one more thing comes along and you look and you say, I don't have any more room on my shoulders. But what I've challenged other husbands to do, and I've challenged myself to do through that, is I've always found that when I take on that other thing and I go, I don't know where there's room, but I'll take it on, is that God broadens my shoulders just a bit, just enough to carry that load. Now, he's never given me extra. I know maybe that would make me arrogant. I thought, I can handle the world, right? But it feels like every time I've taken on something else, some other stressor or something like that, he broadens my shoulders just enough. It's like if you'll have faith to simply take the thing upon you, husband, the thing that you're prepared for, the thing that you're designed for, to take off of her and bear that weight as a husband should do, then I will make you capable of doing it. But you have to take it. And it feels like you're going to burst. It feels like you're not going to be able to handle it, but God broadens your shoulders that much. Have any of you ever found that before? I think most men here have probably experienced that. We've probably experienced it, but we've got to do it in faith. We've got to do it with purpose in that.
But Jesus said, cast all your anxiety upon me.
Yeah, I had a whole part. There's another page and a half of this. Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is easy, and my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And there is that concept to this as well. Okay, any other comments on that part? All right, we will move on. We will move on. Another reader here. Yeah, Grant.
You have captivated my heart, my sister, my bride. You have captivated my heart with one glance of your eyes.
Okay, so we see here that obviously the honeymoon continues. This is obviously not super veiled language. If it is, it's thinly veiled. We get that. We understand that part. What is it that he sees in his bride again? I wanted you to kind of, not he sees, I guess. This goes back to the senses concept again, like Buddy brought up. But he says, I love to look at you. I love, as he says, I love to hear you. I love to listen to you. I love knowing you. I love your thoughts. I love understanding you. Everything about her captivates him from every direction of whatever it is that they have brought together in this union. Everything about it he loves, and he enjoys in that.
One
Derek?
clarification, that word is used a number of times, my sister. I know my version says it's not known, that means, is it more like a friend, my bride? Is that, what do you think of that?
I think it's a term of endearment like that. The truth is you could look at it as a sister in Christ. That concept hadn't really been established back then. I would say it's probably not. I think it's more like that idea of that close bond relationship. It's an Eastern look. Again, we have to look at it from an Eastern eyes. We think of sister and we think, oh, Kentucky. No, this is not a Kentucky reference. This is not that. Sorry for you, or Alabama, or Tennessee. I'll throw Tennessee in there. Okay, being fair, it's not. That's not what this is. Obviously, it's a term of endearment in some way. But what else does he call her for the first time? My bride. He calls her, I think, 3 times. He refers to her as his bride and being able to do this. So, and then obviously you have this concept of the purity of the marriage. There was this garden that was locked, and now the waters flow. And so there's this gifting of the wife to the husband and all the things that come with that, and that come with that time. Okay, I wanted to get to we have like 2 minutes left. We actually used a little bit more time than I expected. One of the things that I will say about, we're not going to read this, but one of the things that I will say about this relationship is you can see that it's obviously intimate. There is an intimacy, obviously. This is the marriage relationship. All of those things come together. But one of the things I wanted to point out, do you think that men enter marriage with some concept that they need to be taught that the marriage is going to come with sexual intimacy? That they don't expect that? No, okay. That's what I meant. I should have asked it better. Yeah, men generally don't go in and go, what, this is a part of marriage? Okay, I'm trying to, communicate here. Women need to understand that part of the marital relationship is an intimate relationship. And if you're not prepared to be in an intimate relationship, you need not be seeking after a marital relationship. That is part of a marital relationship. And I can't say it any plainer than that, and that's the direction that this is going. 1 Corinthians 7 points that out as well. And doing that. I think what we're going to do is we're going to end off there. I had another slide. We had a couple more verses. We'll just integrate those, or we'll sum those up. I don't want to go over time. I appreciate all of your comments. And as we've looked at this, and we'll continue on next Sunday, our class will continue. Heath will be back on Wednesday. So be prepared for next Sunday for the next class. Thanks again. I appreciate it.